Hello, dear attendees. Okay. I accidentally opened the room already, but that's fine. We're still waiting for our two panelists.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Kann man mich hören?
Ja.
Wunderbar.
Wunderbar.
Ich versuche mal eine andere Kameraeinstellung. Eine Sekunde.
Ja, ja.
Funktioniert das? Nee.
Nee, im Moment nicht.
Komisch, das sollte sich eigentlich automatisch einstellen. Tut es aber nicht. Na gut.
The age of Zoom.
Dann bleibe ich doch hier. Aha, wie weit muss ich gehen, damit ich im Bild bin? Komisch. Gut, anyway.
Bisschen wie die Tagesthemen.
Ja, genau.
Uh-oh, my internet connection is unstable.
Uh-oh.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, let's try again. Yeah. Okay, and one more try.
Slightly different now, yeah.
How would this look? No.
Ah, it's against the light. Yeah, that's not
Okay,
so.
yeah. All right. I thought I'd offer a view of the snow and sleet in DC.
Oh, you have snow?
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
More sleet than snow, but still.
We just have icy rain.
Yeah. All of which is kind of, you know, not the real thing.
I was worried the electricity was going to go out. In Williamsburg, we have colonial electricity.
Uh-huh.
It goes out easily.
Okay, welcome everyone who is already here. I'm just the tech guy today, so just a quick announcement. Please use the Q&A box if you have questions. That also has the advantage that you can upvote questions that might be similar to your own, and those questions will be asked first. Reserve the chat box for technical issues if there's anything technical that concerns you, and I will monitor both of those. Oh, here comes Mario Funke, okay. John, not now. Sorry. Unka, anything we can do to make you visible?
We had this problem yesterday.
Yeah. You can also not hear, well, it says it's unmuted. You should be able to hear him and see him. Are you? He definitely has the right link because he's here.
Christian, you might have to talk about your childhood.
An old swap
Well, I'm not sure if that's interesting for anyone, but
Sure it is.
Are you?
Marcel, is he calling you perhaps on your phone?
No, I don't see anything. I gave him my phone number. I don't see him here either.
I didn't give him my phone number, but my phone is dinging. Let me see.
Yep, no, there's nothing. Not even an attempt. Okay, we have 34 attendees. Are you? Let me see. Hello, hello. Jennifer, you have his telephone number?
No, he didn't call me. He has your number, so I assume.
I gave it to him yesterday. Okay, what can we do here?
Me, Marcel.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'm
But
not-
again, I don't see you, but maybe you see me.
No, we
No.
can't see you. Do you have something on your
Could
camera,
you see
maybe?
me?
Because it says
What do you
that
say?
just a black.
Say it again.
We
It's
see
black.
just a black screen, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's too
I
bad. But
try.
at least we can hear you. That's already something.
It's
Okay.
now better.
We
Yeah,
see your
It's a
name.
video.
we can see your name and we can hear you.
Okay. No video.
Yeah.
I don't know. The same problem as yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes.
It might be something on your end. I don't know. Maybe it was something with the settings.
Yes, hopefully.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
At least you're not a kitten.
Yeah. Okay, well, then let's just get started maybe this way. It's not ideal, but I think we can manage. So once more, quick reminder, please use the Q&A box for questions that you have for the panelists. We collect them during the talk and then ask them at the end. You can upvote those questions as well. So if you have a similar question, you can just upvote the one that has already been written there, and those will be asked first. Reserve the chat box for technical issues and for chatting there. Okay, good. And then I hand that over to Jennifer Taylor from William and Mary.
Thank you. Sorry, we've had some difficulties this morning, but I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Collaboratory for German Studies in Virginia and the Center for German Studies at University of Virginia. Our panel today is called The New Normal, the US and Germany Now. And we're honored to have with us today two guests who can talk about this and perhaps persuade us that we can go back to the old normal. We have Christian Jetzlsperger and Professor Hajo Funke. Christian Jetzlsperger currently serves as the Minister Counselor and Deputy Head of the Political Department of the German Embassy in Washington, D.C. He previously headed the Division for Stabilization Policy within the newly created Directorate General for Crisis Prevention, Stabilization, Post-Conflict Peace Building, and Humanitarian Assistance at the Federal Foreign Office in Berlin. Before coming to the United States, he also served in the German embassies in Albania, Afghanistan. He was in Ramallah and also in Yemen, and we're very glad to have him with us today. Professor Funke is an internationally celebrated scholar on political culture in Germany and the books on numerous topics, including Nazism, authoritarianism, and right-wing extremism. He's currently teaching for a year at the University of Virginia, and we're also very, very glad to have him with us. So we are going to take about 40 minutes today to listen to our panelists before opening up the questions from the audience. And again, put your questions into the question box, and Marcel will be organizing that. So today we want to hear from our guests about how they understand the recent resurgence of nationalism and white supremacy and right-wing activism in the United States, and perhaps to a lesser degree in Germany. I'm going to turn first to the invisible Hajo Funke and ask you, Hajo, to give us your framework for what you think is happening in the United States right now. And we're about a month out from the insurrection in the US Capitol, and we're at a year after Hanau, Germany. But how could you tell us to try to understand what's happening in the United States right now, if you can?
Right now, it's a full-scale change by the political authorities that I never have seen in the last 50 years with respect to the United States. And that has happened also at the beginning of the Trump presidency. So it's a shake-up. And one of the miseries of the presidency of Trump has been that there was a resurgence of white supremacists and violence, starting already with his saying he would be the president. He would ask for support for the presidency in 2015. But also before, let's say since 2008 and 2009, since the presidency of the first African-American, Barack Obama. Immediately, there was an upsurge of hate crimes and racist attitudes, and the more the latter, also of violent crimes, racist violent crimes. And then in the last year, to make a long story short, we have seen again a new upsurge during the election campaign of Donald Trump. And it seems as if some scholars of your country alluding to it, a kind of fascistoid attempt to wipe out democracy, the institutions, and so forth, instigating within the last several months, since mid of the last year, instigating even violent against others, perceived enemies, and so forth. And he could do that because he had an Republican Party he overtook to a degree, and he could do it because of a kind of big minority of 30 to 40% of voters who say we won't have we want to have a change in authoritarian direction, and this is due, last point, to a kind of lost parts of the country, neglected part of the countries, the hillbilly elegy element, the Rust Belt element. And there was no succinct strategy to overcome this. So we have social reasons, but also racist reasons that we have had this upsurge and even a coup attempt to have a coup by President Trump and his followers. So this is my account, a very short one. I did a small study with respect to the Charlottesville riot, Unite the Right in 2017, including the various reactions, especially of Trump himself, who said, okay, there are fine people on both sides, including right-wing-ish activists.
And what do you think is the appeal of a millionaire or supposed millionaire to the hillbilly elegy crowd? And of course, it goes beyond them. There are people who are not necessarily poor who support him. But what do you think has changed in the United States to make him appealing, or has it changed?
Not really. He is perceived as the man against Washington, against the establishment. And they identified in a very authoritarian way often with this who made it, who is a millionaire, and he's now on our sides, and he will help us. And to a degree, with his kind of trickle-down economy, he tried to do so with all the costs that are implied with that. So that's a kind of Italian, and some say also fascistic or fascistoid attempt to be identified with these people and steer them, instigate them in a very authoritarian, aggressive, and partially violent direction.
Yeah, it's very hard to understand in the United States, and perhaps Christian could step in here and give us some comparison to what's happening in Germany, where there has also been some right-wing activity, but perhaps not as extreme as in the United States, certainly nothing like the January 6th. Where do you see differences and similarities?
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Hayo. I would certainly echo most of what Hayo said. I think in terms of similarities and differences, we have to acknowledge that most, if not all, Western democracies are facing similar challenges today. The challenge of let's say, a media environment that has fundamentally changed since, let's say, the 1950s or 1960s. And we heard about the death of Rush Limbaugh yesterday, who was probably one of the most important figures in that regard in the United States, with conservative talk radio and so on. And then add to that the rise of social media, where basically each and every one can be his or her own news agency. with unfiltered access for everyone. That obviously has changed a lot. And we also have a trend of suspicion toward any sort of authority, which is also a fundamental difference to the 1950s, where, at least in my country, there was still a lot of belief in authorities. I would argue way too much belief in authorities, but now we have the opposite. Everyone who is in a position of authority, be it government, be it society, faces suspicion rather than trust from the outset. So these are similarities that you can find everywhere in Western democracies, and you can certainly find it in Germany, just like in the United States. What makes Germany to some extent different from the United States that's structural aspects. In Germany, you have a multi-party system and not a two-party system. That obviously matters when it comes to being able to express nuances in worldviews in the political arena, and that is intricately connected to electoral systems. In Germany, you have a proportional electoral system. Here, you have a first past the post electoral system, which also matters, and that combined with the way how candidates are selected for general elections also makes a difference. So the effect of all that, without going too much into the detail, is that while we have a rather strong radical right-wing party in Germany, it is limited to, let's say, 10 to 12% of the electorate, at least right now. And I really don't see them getting way beyond that. Whereas here you have a struggle that takes place within one of the two major parties, i.e. the Republican Party at the moment, and you have similar fights on the left in the Democratic Party. But there is no, let's say, the checks and balances have to be within one party, and we can obviously see that this has been problematic over the last couple of years. So these are maybe the structural differences, but I think what is more important from my point of view is to recognize the structural and social similarities that challenge us all and that need to be addressed on both sides of the Atlantic.
Do you think that the fact that Germany after World War II had censorship basically of Nazi paraphernalia, Nazi texts, do you think that helped? That certainly never happened in the United States, that you're banned from reading Mein Kampf, for instance. Do you think that had a positive effect in Germany and perhaps changed the way people perceive these dangerous ideas?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, certainly immediately after the Second World War, it was an important step to keep legitimate political debate within, let's say, certain guardrails. I'm not entirely sure whether more than 70 years later, that is still, 75 years later, that is still as important. I think it also points to a structural difference, though, or maybe even ideological difference. In the United States, the First Amendment is much stronger and has a much more important role than freedom of speech does in Germany. In Germany, it is an important fundamental right, but it is certainly not the almost unlimited fundamental right that it is here in the United States. That has to do with, with historic differences of how human rights were constructed. And then obviously the experience of Nazism came on top. I would argue that today I would even find it important that people are able to read pamphlets like Mein Kampf, not uncritically, but in let's say critical editions with academic introductions. and sometimes maybe the ban on Mein Kampf even creates a curiosity that is not entirely welcome. So I'm not sure if that is the decisive difference. What is a difference certainly is historical experience. But even that historic experience is slowly fading from memory of today's younger generations in Germany, which in part explains how a party like AfD could have such a success in the first place. I think it would not have been possible 20 years ago.
I disagree.
What's that, Hayo?
I disagree to a degree, Christian. The fact that we have around 10%, although there was a lot of miseries, social challenges and so forth, with respect to the AfD, is a sign that according to all surveys in the last years, that 80 to 90% are agreeing on the basic law that includes the dignity of man, that's to say, a non-racist concept of the society. And this, Christian, that, of course, we have had these fights coming to terms with the past, and the fights has been lost in the 50s and 60s, with some exceptions. But in the 80s and 90s, and even today, I would even turn it around and saying, even today, we have more of a kind of consciousness with respect that we don't want to have a full-scale authoritarian, even violent, even fascistic attempt to reorganize the society, to overcome the society. All have this 10% nearly right-wing extremist party, we have the 80, 90% who are more or less decisive not to have that again. So I would turn it around and saying, even 7 or especially 80 years after the horror of the Nazi period, we are aware of it. The consciousness in Germany, the public are aware of that. And this is according to my studies, the reason that the more radical the AfD turns out, the less they will have a chance to get into power on the regional or national level, quite to the contrary to the United States experience in the last 4 years.
Christian, do you want to respond to that, or?
Yeah, Hayo is obviously a little more optimistic than I am.
Yeah, you are.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think you're absolutely right that at least 80% of the German electorate are 100% opposed to everything the AfD proposes and represents. But I think at the same time we see that at least a discourse has become more prevalent, that is more aggressive and more radical and less consensus oriented than we used to have it in Germany. That has to do with a number of factors. Again, I would point to social media. I think the so-called refugee crisis of the mid-2010s has certainly played a role in shifting the boundaries of what is legitimate in political discourse. And these are trends that do still worry me to a certain extent, but I agree in the big picture, it is good news that at least 75–80% of the German population don't want to have anything like the AfD in government.
As the American here and a Germanistin, and I've got you two so that you can't escape me, I want to kind of ask a little bit of a different question. What does it feel like as Germans watching this happen to the United States? Or what kind of response do you think a lot of Germans have watching this? Because certainly as an American citizen, watching it as somebody who's been a Germanist for several years, I'm shocked that it's happening to us, and maybe I shouldn't be. And it's no longer a mystery to me what it felt like at the end of the Weimar Republic, I think. So I'm wondering what it feels like on an emotional level as Germans looking at what happened on January 6th and just the general trends that Hayo started to describe at the beginning of the hour.
Whom you want to ask?
You can start, Hayo, because you're invisible.
That's a good argument. I was shocked at the 6th, and I was out of temper. I was uncontrolled, as I have seen that. And of course, it reminds us to what happened at the end of the Weimar Republic. And my change of the argument in the last month to say maybe this is a kind of fascistic oriented or fascistoid movement organized by Trump and his followers came because of that. It doesn't mean that we have the situation in the United States like the end of the Weimar Republic, but the elements, the factors going to that direction has gone, I have to say. That's the social thing, you know, Rust Belt and so forth. That's the utterly racist, paranoid style of Trump in the last year, but also before. That's the decisive habitus of Trump to say, whatever it takes, democracy isn't worth to acknowledge. And furthermore, and that's the last factor, that 40+% are still having voted for him. And all the more it's fascinating. And I was out of temper again when I saw that the Biden-Harris camp could win, and so decisively win, although very narrowly. So they have a chance to reshape the politics, empowering the institutions, checks and balances within their party, within the institutions and so forth, as Christian alluded to, but also to fight very strictly against that kind of white supremacy, not only in the media, but also in these networks of very dangerous violence. And this is the challenge. And they can solve the challenge if they do these two things, to contain this kind of rage and racist behavior on the one hand, and agitation and so forth, and on the other hand, more decisively than all the presidencies in the last 2 decades, to address the social thing. And this under dimensions of pandemic crisis. And this is the challenge. And I even beg for that this challenge will this time met.
Christian, do you?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I'm a political scientist by training, but a diplomat by profession. So I'm a little careful with the labels I'm using. But you asked what was my reaction on January 6th, and I think it was a mixture of, what's the English word, incredulity. I couldn't believe what I saw, and on the other hand, the feeling that this was almost unavoidable by what had happened in the last year or so. Because for anyone who observed US politics closely, and I certainly did over the last year, it was absolutely clear that President Trump was not going to concede electoral defeat, and that he was going to try everything within his power to stay in the White House. I had also, I wasn't surprised that events turned violent on January 6th. That was also something, frankly, we had thought was going to happen. I was surprised that those rioters were able to breach the Capitol, and that it went that far. So it was that mixture, as I said, of not being able to believe what I saw, and on the other hand, having the impression that everything was foreseeable in one way or another. Now, where does that take the US? I think a lot depends on what narrative will prevail about the events of January 6th. Will it be the narrative of the extraordinary desecration of the Capitol as the seat of power, or will it be the narrative that you can already see on social media from the right wing that says it was not that bad, and what happened in the summer with the Black Lives Matter protests actually was much worse, or B, it was actually a legitimate attempt by the real people to take back power from the swamp. And I think the struggle has not yet been decided. It is going on, and we will only know I don't think we will know in 4 years' time what the outcome is. A lot will depend on what happens within the Republican Party, what happens with former President Trump. A lot will depend on the Biden administration, but frankly, I don't envy them because they are inheriting a highly problematic heritage, and they will have to reckon with a Republican Party who is in turmoil, who will not be inclined to give them easy wins in a way. So I think, Hajo, you rightly outlined the agenda, but to implement this agenda and to achieve success will be very difficult under the circumstances that we find.
I agree. The only difference is with respect to the checks and balances. They are to a degree, I think, Christian, you would agree, taken back or could have survived, because there is no attempt of civil war-like questioning the decision-making processes of Washington and in the states. It has been an attempt, but this attempt, the coup d'etat, has not succeeded. And this is a brutal fact. And that means that the Trump attempt has failed with respect to the structural, democratic institution, and also with respect to 60% or so of the people. That's more than it has been at the 5th of November. So in a way, the fight is going on, but you are now, democracy has now, the upper hand, at least to a degree and for a time.
Can both of you speak briefly to how you see the relationship in the future between Germany and the US, and to what degree you think it can be repaired, and not just Germany, but all of Europe perhaps, because so much has unraveled and our role has changed so radically, and the panel is called The New Normal, and I'm wondering if we can go back to the old normal, or if you imagine some different new normal that isn't nationalism and right-wing extremism.
That's a question for the diplomat.
Well,
thank you.
But you are invisible. You're invisible. You can.
Okay.
Yeah,
ahead,
I can start if, yeah, thank you. So I'm afraid I have to disappoint you, Jennifer. There is no going back to the old normal for a number of reasons which have little to do with individual administrations. And so that also means little to do with Donald Trump. But we have seen structural changes in the international order that we cannot just turn the clock back. We cannot undo the rise of China. We cannot undo the decline of Western relative power vis-a-vis others. So the question is, how do we manage these structural global changes? And I think that's the crucial question. And the answers of the 1980s or even the 2000s will not help us. Now, that doesn't mean that the transatlantic alliance or partnership is bound to decay forever. And I think we have a chance of repairing it where repair is necessary. And I think it is highly welcome that the President Biden and his team have emphasized the value of America's alliances. That's a good start. And the fact that, you know, the Chancellor and the French President and the British Prime Minister were among the first ones he called once he was inaugurated is also a good sign. Now, I think we as Germans and Europeans have to reckon with one fact. The commitment to coordinate with partners and to work with partners comes with expectations. We will have to do more. And that's probably not entirely welcome news in Germany and in many other countries in Europe, because it means that we have to invest and that we have to shoulder more responsibility. I think the German government's answer would be, we are ready. We are ready to invest. We are ready to invest in the bilateral partnership, and we are ready to engage globally. But it certainly cannot be as it used to be in the good old times, that there was a entirely asymmetrical relationship between the United States guaranteeing our security on the other end of the Atlantic, and we offering some small contributions. But in the end, everything had to be decided and had to be done by Washington. On the other hand, I said that we have structural global changes that we have to address. I still think that we remain, as Europe and America, that we remain indispensable partners in the international arena, because none of us can tackle these challenges that I mentioned, and I mentioned only a few of them. None of us can tackle them alone. Working together increases our leverage, increases our weight, and together I think we can overcome at least some of these challenges that I mentioned. And I would add an obvious challenge, COVID-19, and another obvious challenge, and that is climate change. And only if America and Europe put their resources together, I think we have a chance of finding a way forward that takes into account our fundamental values and interests.
And I hope you're right.
So am I.
Do. And Hayo, would you like to speak to that briefly before we turn to audience questions?
Yeah, I agree, basically. And I think with respect to Biden and Harris, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and the administration, we have a concrete chance to go forward, especially with these two decisive factors, the COVID crisis and the climate crisis, and maybe furthermore to a reinterpretation and reenactment of multilateralism, also in economic dimensions, and also to contain the dangerous risks of tensions and even wars, be it in the Middle East or in other parts of the world. So there is a concrete chance. It depends on, of course, the administration in Washington, but also if the Europeans are enabled and enabling themselves to be more efficient in gathering their own forces as European force. And this is overdue. And this is a lack of the administration of Berlin and France and Great Britain and others. And also there should be a chance. Otherwise, we are not very optimistic to contain the crisis, especially in the Mideast. It's a very dangerous situation.
Yes, yes, it is. The humans, as we say. So thank you both for your comments. And we have a couple of questions from the audience members, and I want to make sure that they have time to hear you. So I'm going to ask that you look at the questions, or I could read them out loud, but I believe you can see them. The first question, what are the electoral prospects in the Bundestag for the National Democrats and other far-right political parties? Please say they're very bad.
Only the AfD, that's a kind of right-wing extremist, kind of racist party, has the chance to overcome the 5% threshold in September, but less than 10%, I guess. And others, like National Democratic Party and other clear-cut neo-Nazi groups, have no chance whatsoever. One point I have to add, the danger of these groupings, the small groupings, to go violent and to create or act in forms of right-wing terrorism is there. And therefore, it's very decisive if the security forces are able to contain that and aware of that.
Kristen, do you need to add anything to that?
I wouldn't add much. In terms of security forces, maybe just kind of anecdote. We had a similar thing as January 6th in Berlin in September, where people wanted to enter the Bundestag. However, the security forces, although they were stretched very thin, were able to prevent that from happening. Now, I'm not comparing things because obviously the background was completely different. But you can see that there is the same sort of challenge to the political system and to political authorities. In terms of the electoral prospects of AfD, I completely agree with Hayo. I think they will be able to surmount the 5% threshold, i.e. they will be able to field members of parliament. I hope they will be below 10% this time, but that's my personal hope. And one thing is for sure, they will not be part of any sort of government. They will not become members of the next governing coalition because nobody wants to deal with them.
I second that. The next question is, the Southern Environmental Law Center is currently tracking 931 racist, white supremacist, anti-Semitic groups in the US domestic terrorism is viewed by the FBI as the most serious threat currently facing the US. because of this dispersion of the radical right, it is notoriously difficult to track them down and prosecute them. Are you seeing a similar dispersion of the radical right in Germany? And if so, what is the German government doing about it?
To be very clear, we don't see that comparable in a comparable amount. But there are problems, though, with respect to the security forces. And we now have 1 year of the Hanau massacre of 9 persons of migrant descent. And that shows that there are limits and failures of the security forces in Hesse. And this is not the only one. We have had the events of the terrorist group NSU in the last 20 years. And again, Hesse has not a very good representation of a good kind of good law enforcement and security. So we have problems in the various states, be it Hesse or Thuringia or other states. But all in all, after Hanau, so since a year, the Minister of Interior is very decisive to go after right-wing extremism in what form ever. So compared to the United States, I know that up to the 2017 event of Unite the Right, the FBI was reduced. New York Times spoke about that. We could read that. And now it seems as if the FBI was shaken by the event and now tried to keep up.
Christian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I don't have anything to add, really.
Right. I mean, there's also reports of problems with police in Germany, right? And
yes.
in this country also. It's
yeah.
It's just kind of shocking, isn't it, that these old right-wing symbols and tropes are back. It's really hard to get our heads around, and it makes it a little bit depressing to think that it's happening yet again. We have one more question, I think, that came in the wrong box. Is that true? Oh, here, this is how do the AfD and other right-wing parties in Germany compare to the American Republican Party? What beliefs do they share and how do they differ? Christian, you should start with that one, perhaps.
Okay.
No, he's a diplomat.
I think it's banal, but there are similarities and differences. I mean, let's start with the most important difference. The AfD is one out of, 6 parties currently represented in the German Bundestag, whereas the Republican Party is 1 out of 2. And that implies another difference. In Germany and in the German political system, the AfD is kind of banned to the fringes. As I said before, nobody wants to deal with them, really. They are clearly considered outliers and pariahs to a certain extent. Now, in the Republican Party, you have an internal struggle between traditionalists, as I would say, and you can differentiate between many more different, constituencies within the Republican Party, and what I would call the Trumpist wing. And the Trumpist wing, again, is not a homogeneous entity, but comprises a number of different factions, I would say. But that means, unlike the AfD, the Republican Party has always tried to be the famous big tent, where numerous political ideologies can find themselves. And that is a strength, but it's also a risk. And we have seen in the last 4 years, I would say, a complete reorientation of the Republican Party. It is not the party of John McCain anymore, if you want to put names to it, but it's the party of Donald Trump. Or it has been the party of Donald Trump. Let's see what's going to happen next. And the struggle between leader McConnell and former President Trump just symbolizes what is going on within the Republican Party now. So I think that's a big difference, because the more right-wing elements within the Republican Party, and I'm not saying that this is the Republican Party, but there are elements within the Republican Party, but they have a chance through the two-party system to hold a majority in Congress and even to have the White House. And this is, the AfD in Germany does not have that option. That is not going to happen, at least not in the foreseeable future.
Would you like to add anything, Hayo?
No, he's right, to my understanding.
And I think there's one more question that was raised, and we have a couple more minutes. Let me just, and I'm not sure I can give you a definition of what this is, and perhaps the person asking it will have to. Do you think the current political situation supports or denies an accelerationist view of politics? Is that
What do you mean? What does he mean?
I do not know. So Kyle, Gorham, if you could give us a definition of accelerationist view of politics, it would be helpful.
Just brought him into Zoom.
I mean, I think it means politics that accelerates, but that doesn't entirely.
So, sorry. So accelerationism is basically like, in order to make change happen, you just make things worse in order to like have it swing back around and have people actually try to fix the system.
Can you say it another way just once more?
I'm trying to think of a better way to word that. Basically, you make a system worse so that forces the people in charge to make it better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I hope we don't have the experience to have that happen, because once, to put it differently, once you have a worse situation, as it has been to my understanding in the last 4 years, the challenge are even higher, and we don't know, as Christian more skeptical alluded to, that it will go to the better. It will change to the better. Although Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the new government, the new administration, is doing what they can to reshape the country in a democratic and social way.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think, yes, there may be situations in politics where things have to get worse before they can get better, if that is what you mean. But my ethical question related to that would be, at what cost? What are the costs of things getting better and potentially spiraling out of control before a political system is able to reform itself, if that is the the line that you're taking. I'm not sure if that's the situation we find ourselves in. It's possible, but it's certainly not a situation I would want ourselves to be in. At least not personally. I think a gradual approach to politics is always better, and an acknowledgement that compromise is necessary, and that getting 100% of what you wish for is simply not possible in a democracy, I think that would be the right approach. I'm not sure if that's the reality now, but anyway.
Well, we did finally survive McCarthyism, so perhaps we can do this too. We have two final questions that are very similar, asking about cooperations in the future between the United States and Germany, and comparing the political situation in Germany and the United States right now, and perhaps they could be addressed together as kind of final words from both of you about the future of the relationship between the United States and Germany. I know we've addressed it before, but perhaps you have some sort of final hope-giving words for all of us on this rainy day.
Yeah, if I may go first, because I'm afraid I have to leave in 2 minutes because a meeting came up that I hadn't planned for before. So what I would say is I'm optimistic for the future of the bilateral relationship. I think we are off to a good start under the new administration. I think in Germany everyone's committed to that relationship in the mainstream political sphere. I think there are numerous issues where we can cooperate and where we already have identified common ground, climate change being maybe the most important one. I think we all agree that we have to tackle the Iranian nuclear issue, and not only the nuclear issue, but also their missile program and their regional behavior. I think we agree that we have to react in one way or another to the rise of China. Now, that doesn't mean that we will solve all our conflicts, and we will continue to have different opinions on details, which is fair enough and fine, because differences of opinion are natural in each and every human relationship, and also in relationships between states. The question is, how do you address them and how do you deal with them? And in that regard, I think we are off to a good start. We are committed. I think the US administration is committed. And I'm pretty hopeful that 4 years from now, we will look back at this period and say, we've made progress.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being with us here today, Christian Jetzlsperger from the German Embassy. And thanks for being optimistic at the end. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, I have to run now, but it's been a pleasure being with you.
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thanks. So, Hajo Funke, you have the final word.
Christian, you may hear it even now. I agree, full scale. I would add to circumvent, to avoid even a clash with respect to Iran, Israel, or others, and to come to a kind of compromise with respect to the region. And basically, I would say this new government is trustworthy by their words, by their acts, and this is a new situation we haven't had in the last 4 years.
Yes, and I hope that you're right too. I'm very hopeful also. I want to thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I have yet to see you. It's odd enough to be on Zoom, but to be on Zoom with someone you can't see makes it a little interesting. But thank you so much for your discussion here and for taking part in this and answering the questions of our audience. And I can't say I look forward to seeing you again, but I look forward to seeing you and hearing you again.
Yes, same with me. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
And
thanks.
Thank you for the questions. And
thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Let me just say quickly on On March 4th, in 2 weeks, we will have another talk. This time we will talk about the social fabric, race, class, health. Again, comparative Germany and the United States. We have Dr. Marta Neuf. She is the chair of the Polish Social Council in Berlin, and Cameron Coates. He was a Black Lives Matter leader here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and he will discuss those matters in 2 weeks. I hope you can come back. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.